People who cheated on their partner, how did it actually start? I cheated on my ex not long ago with a supervisor from work. I never really thought much about her, except that she was cute. She invited me to her Halloween party. I was drunk, but I'm not the type to use that as an excuse. She denies it, but I felt like the whole night was set up for us to hook up. I noticed she kept bumping into me, and I finally decided to test it by subtly rubbing her back. She kept trying to get some of us to go watch a movie. Eventually, it was just her and me, and we didn't take long to get to her room. We hung out the whole next day together at her place. I confessed to my girlfriend, and after a week or so, I decided to choose this girl over her. I'm still not sure if I made the wrong choice. Sometimes it still feels like I did. I keep wanting to call my ex because I miss her. Story 2. Very gradually, I had an emotional affair, though I didn't even know what that was at the time. I was in an unhappy relationship, but not ready to admit I wanted to leave. I started spending time with a coworker, and we became instant best friends. There was no initial attraction. We just shared a lot of the same interests, the same friends, and attended the same social and professional events. As I got to know him, I could hardly believe he was real. He was the best person I had ever met. Funny, kind, gentle, fun, and respectful. Other than spending too much time with me, he never crossed a line. I fell so hard, but I denied it even harder. I started lying about spending time with him, even in a group. There were many opportunities for things to turn physical, and even today, I marvel at our restraint. We didn't become physical or even admit our feelings to each other until after I left my ex. I was angry after spending 6 years begging my ex to spend time with me or show interest in the things I liked. I had been a dedicated and loyal partner for 6 years, most of which were long distance. I moved to a new city with him, supported his dreams, which he achieved, but at the detriment of our relationship. I was always a side character in his story. So I left him, and about a week later, began the most magical love story I could have imagined. I bear the burden of having been dishonest, and I know now that I was wrong. I regret lying so much and hurting another person. I wish I had been brave enough to leave earlier. Although if I had, things might not have worked out the way they did, and I wouldn't risk what I have now for anything. Not even the feelings of my ex. Story 3. I was in a long-term relationship, over 8 years, with someone who was emotionally and physically abusive. For the last couple of years, she constantly pressured me to propose, even though I wasn't ready. After a few of her friends got engaged, I finally caved to the pressure. And shortly afterward, I was diagnosed with severe depression. When I told her I wanted to get my mental health under control before getting married, she responded with something like, "Oh, so I'm not good enough to make you happy? Is that why you're depressed?" And honestly, the short answer was yes, I wasn't happy. She was abusive and made a point of constantly making me feel small and worthless. She refused to go to therapy or counseling because she didn't want to be told she was crazy. I was too much of a pushover and had convinced myself that this was just how relationships sometimes were. Looking back, it was pure sunk cost fallacy. We got married anyway. My depression deepened and I became more disconnected from life in general. I often felt like life might be easier if I just disappeared. A couple of months after the wedding, I met a girl at work. We instantly connected. We had similar interests, easy conversations, and I just genuinely felt seen for the first time in a long while. I grew really fond of her. Time passed and I started feeling something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I buried it and stayed in denial because I was married, and acknowledging it felt dangerous. One day we got off work at the same time and parked near each other. I walked her to her car, talking about movies and random stuff. When it was time to say goodbye, I went in for a hug, but I kissed her on the cheek instead. It felt completely natural and absolutely terrifying. Because yeah, I was married. I didn't go home right away. I sat with my thoughts, trying to figure out what the hell was going on in my head. By the end of it, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't happy. I hadn't been happy for a long time. I was staying because it was expected, because we'd been together so long, because we were married, because leaving felt like failure. I went home and told my wife. She reacted exactly how you'd expect. She wanted to fix things, but by then, too much damage had already been done. I reminded her of all the times I had begged her to go to counseling or therapy, only for her to refuse. Now, suddenly, she wanted to try. It was too late. Long story short, we divorced. I took an admittedly short break, and then I started seeing the woman I'd kissed. She is an amazing, kind, deeply understanding partner. She has shown me nothing but patience and love. We've been together for almost 4 years now, and I can honestly say I've never been happier. That said, cheating still feels crappy. I'm ashamed of it. I don't justify it, and I never will. The only thing that helps me make sense of it is knowing that if the roles were reversed, If I had been even half as emotionally and physically abusive as my ex, people would probably call her brave for leaving someone like me. That doesn't make what I did right. It just helps me carry it. Story 4. When my wife found a napkin in my pocket, she swore it was not her lipstick. I had no idea how it got there. After months of her thinking I was cheating, one day at lunch I was eating a sandwich and drinking a red Gatorade. After wiping my mouth with the napkin, I realized it was the same shade as my evidence of an affair napkin. Edit. Wow, thanks for the love. This happened just a few weeks into our marriage. I had married this woman after knowing her only a few months. 26 years later, we are stronger than ever. But when I bring this up, I swear I feel she is not 100% convinced. Story 5. I was stuck in a non-physical marriage with a hoarder. Rats were living in the dryer, for example, and the house was falling apart. I spent 4 months drinking bottled water because the well wasn't safe without repairs. I couldn't leave. I was 20 kilometers from anywhere and had been given a car that didn't run. A coworker usually picked me up for work, or I walked to the closest carpool lot. I cracked under the lonely stress when that coworker started finding me attractive. It turns out my ex was extremely closeted, which explained the hoarding and inability to function. I wasn't exactly running on all cylinders myself after all that either. Now he has a roommate, the house is fixed, and I'm still with that coworker after 10 years. We all get together so often. Prime example of people who really shouldn't have been married in the first place. Story 6. She started telling me about her relationship troubles. Over time, we grew closer, sharing insecurities and more. Eventually, we developed feelings for each other, though we could not act on them. In the end, those feelings became too strong, and we gave in. It lasted for 1.5 years, me trying to commit to what we had, and her unable to fully let go. She moved between me and the other person. Eventually, I realized that my commitment and feelings for her were unhealthy, and I realized, too late, that I did not want to be the person who caused someone else to cheat. Story 7. I was once accused of cheating. My then girlfriend claimed the front passenger seat in my car was moved too close for any guy to sit and demanded to know who had been in my car. I told her it was Chris, a coworker. The next day, she stormed into my workplace demanding to see Chris. Imagine her face when she found out Chris was actually Christopher, a little person who stood 4 feet 2 inches tall. I milked her apology for a decade. Story 8. From the other perspective, I had been seeing this girl for 4 months, let's call her Sam, who I met while she was working at a bar downtown. We were practically in a relationship, but never really had the talk. We went on a bunch of dates, she met my coworkers, and I hung out with her and her roommates often. One day, I was over at her place drinking with her and the roommates. Towards the end of the night, we decided to go into her room to do the deed. Suddenly, Sam started acting really strange and quiet. I asked if she wanted to stop, and she said yes, so I did. I asked what was wrong, but she was reluctant to tell me anything. I decided, you know what? I'm just going to leave, and we can talk later. As I was walking to my car parked on the street, I was met at the end of the driveway by a dude who looked familiar. As he got closer, I realized it was Sam's ex-boyfriend, someone I had seen pictures of on Instagram a year before. He walked up to me and threatened me if I ever came back. Being a bit of a cocky jerk, I said, "Why the hell shouldn't I come back?" He then told me he knew I had been sleeping with his girlfriend, to which I replied, "You guys have been broken up since the summer." I just left and decided I'd confront Sam later. It turned out the ex was right. I'd been helping her cheat on her boyfriend for the last 4 months. The most messed up part? Her roommates and friends were in on it the whole time. This woman even wanted to meet my daughter. I'm so glad I dodged that bullet. Story 9. The wife of a guitarist in a relatively famous band from the early 2000s met me, and I was strung along with promises of, I don't want to be with him. She built me up into a jealous man I had promised I'd never be, fueling the seriousness of the affair while sleeping with other men, conceding that it was cheating on me, but never really addressing what we were doing. It was an absolute mind trip. The whole thing felt dirty and degrading. They're not together anymore, and she ended up with one of the 4 guys she had been seeing and had a child with him. I still see that husband out sometimes. I guess he doesn't know, or he does, and too much time has passed for him to care. I don't really know him. That whole experience sent me into a spiral of relationship issues that require heavy management. I've been the other guy a handful of times, but this one really messed me up for a long time. Story 10. I was bartending one night when she walked into the bar. She was my perfect type. Tall, slender, dark hair, just gorgeous. My first thought was, please be single, please be single. And she sat down next to her husband. They had been married about 6 months. He was a Wall Street banker, and she was a nurse. I got to talking to them at the bar, and we hit it off. It turned out he and I had some mutual friends and grew up near the same suburbs outside of Boston. We even went to the same college, though I was 10 years older than him. Same sports teams, same sense of humor. We clicked. Over time, the three of us became friends. They had a strange social circle. They literally had only 2 or 3 actual friends, and I became one of them. We did lots of things together, not intimate, just hanging out as friends. She became pregnant, and I became the godfather to her child. I was even written into their will. They told me that if something were to happen to both of them, they wanted me to raise their kid. Both of their families were really messed up. It's too long a story to write here, but over the course of 8 years, she and I became close while her husband and I remained cordial, and our friendship gradually faded. She and I never cheated. It was always an emotional connection. Her husband was distant and dismissive of her feelings, so I kind of became the surrogate boyfriend. She and I would go out to dinner or do other things together, sometimes with her kid, sometimes without him, and he was fine with it. He even suggested I take his wife and child on vacation so he could get a break from being a dad. I loved her, but I never crossed the line. I always hoped, deep down, that she would see I was the better guy. Hoped that maybe someday she would leave him. During the summer of 2020, she told me she was divorcing him. She said she had had enough. I had heard that before, so I kind of brushed it off. She was hanging out with me much more. She couldn't stand being in the house with him. This went on for 3 weeks. I started to realize she was serious. She even had a lawyer lined up. Though she hadn't started the proceedings yet, she felt it was bad timing with COVID. One morning, she was working from home at my place because she needed space from her husband. We started talking, and for the first time, I initiated the conversation about her actually divorcing him and what her life might look like afterward. She suggested that I was the kind of guy she would want to date. That led to more talking, and soon we were having frank discussions about dating each other after she was divorced. This went on for about 2 more weeks. We started texting, FaceTiming, and talking on the phone more. Physically, we weren't cheating yet, but we were heading down that road. One morning, she was over before work. Some days, as a nurse, she had to go to the hospital. And we were talking. I leaned in, she leaned toward me, and we kissed. We were stone, cold sober. It was passionate, really hot. It lasted only a few minutes. She had to get to work. We continued talking about life after her husband. It started to feel like she was at the tipping point of divorcing. The problem was her son. He was only 6 years old. She felt super guilty about divorcing her husband and potentially ruining her son's life. She didn't love her husband, but she loved me and had told me so. And she also loved her son. On paper, she had an amazing life. She and her husband probably made $500,000 combined and had a net worth of $3 million. It was hard to just walk away from that. I did well enough, but I was just a bartender, not a Wall Street banker. I'd always been smart with my money, though. I owned my own home and had saved $700,000 in a Roth IRA over the years. While going through the emotional affair and just kissing each other, it eventually turned into more. Do I feel bad? No, I was under the impression that she was just waiting for COVID to end and then would divorce him. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that before. I had known her for years, and I truly believed she couldn't be lying to me. No way. The guilt of what we were doing eventually became too much. The affair lasted about 2 months, and we slept with each other only a handful of times. Around Thanksgiving of 2020, I told her I didn't want this anymore. Get a divorce. Give me a call. That's how I left it. She texted me a bit and even visited me once in mid-December. We only talked briefly. She told me then that the plan was to get a divorce, and I told her to let me know when it happened. Then she ghosted me. I sent an email to her around Christmas and never heard back. I tried calling her office a week later and got voicemail. I waited. Weeks turned into months. I never heard a peep from her. We live in the same area of town, but I never saw her. I didn't push. I figured with COVID still raging in 2021, a divorce would happen by summer. Then I found out in April that she was pregnant. I never spoke to her. I don't know if it was planned or if he suspected and put a bun in the oven. It's December now. While I know it's over, I'm still hurting. I genuinely believed she was leaving him. I know from the outside looking in it's easy to scoff at, but I had been her friend for years before we had an affair. We had a deep, emotional friendship. I get the anger and hate toward people who are in affairs. But when you're the one in the affair, when you're with the person you've waited for your entire life, it's hard to just think, oh, I'll find someone else. I've dated my whole life and never met anyone like her. I'm not sure I ever will again, and I just want some kind of closure. I want to hear from her, to know what happened. I know logically what happened. I was the side piece, and when I put my foot down, she walked away. I never thought I would be the type of person to do that, but like I said before, it's hard when you meet someone that great in your life. If I had been dating hundreds of awesome women, then fine. But when you're in your mid-40s, the dating pool dwindles, even for NYC bartenders. Tinder can be rough. You run into bots or people who don't even compare to her. Well, that's my story. Story 11. So I guess I was just part of it. It wasn't really my affair. This was about 12 years ago. I was 19, she was 24 and married. They were in the process of getting a divorce, but she sort of failed to tell me they were technically still married. The husband was trying to fix the marriage at the time, which I eventually found out. He eventually discovered me and was rightfully pissed. Not so much at me, but at her. I had straight up told him she wasn't wearing a ring and said she was recently divorced. I felt like crap, but the banging was incredible. It lasted about 6 months, and I eventually got out of that whole scenario completely. Story 12. My husband's affair started shortly after we got married. We lived in an apartment complex where all the mailboxes were in the lobby. I was checking the mail, like I always did, when I opened a card without paying attention to who it was addressed to. The front of the card read, "I miss you in the morning, I miss you in the evening." And the inside read, "I especially miss you at night." There was even a drawing of a woman in bed wearing a negligee. It was signed, "I miss you and love you," with a woman's name. I looked at the envelope and it was addressed to my husband. We had only been married 3 months. I immediately gathered all of his things and threw them into the hallway. When he came home and tried to enter, I had the chain lock on the door. He asked, "Well, what the hell is going on?" I said, "Your girlfriend misses you, so we're over. You can go stay with her," and opened the door just enough to toss the card and envelope into the hall. About 15 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. It was my next-door neighbor. I had seen him around, but we hadn't formally met yet. I opened the door and my husband was standing down the hallway. The neighbor said, "Hi, my name is XX. You accidentally got my mail today." My neighbor had the exact first and last name as my husband. He explained, "My wife has been out of town on a business trip. She sent the card to me." I said, "BS," and shut the door. 5 minutes later, there was another knock. It was the same neighbor, this time holding up his driver's license and the card envelope. His license showed the exact same name as my husband, and the envelope had their apartment number on it. At the time, it was pretty traumatic. But now, 31 years later, my husband thinks it's absolutely hilarious. Story 13, I joined a gym. And she was my instructor. I fell in love with a healthy lifestyle and being around healthy people. I wasn't getting that at home. Fast forward, our 16-year anniversary is coming up. I'm also a fitness professional now and have competed in the Ironman World Championships, Badwater, Boston, Leadville, and a bunch of other extreme and crazy athletic events. And yes, we hooked up at the gym. Story 14. I can actually answer this one. She came on to me. I knew she was married, and I struggled with the morality of it, but I ended up caving because I really liked her. It turns out she was in an abusive relationship, not physically, but mentally, and had been considering divorce for several months. We stayed together after she got divorced and eventually got married ourselves. It's not something I'm overly proud of, but I wouldn't change anything if I had the chance to do it again. And to preempt those who claim once a cheater, always a cheater, I think oversimplifies human complexity far too much. People cheat for a myriad of reasons. In my case, it was an abusive, neglectful husband. For some, it's the slow death of a relationship that neither party wants to bother ending. And yes, some people are just a-holes. Story 15. My old girlfriend wasn't contributing much to our relationship. She seemed happy just to have a place to stay, but offered nothing to the situation or to us. She would come home from work, expect dinner to be ready, and then walk off into our room to watch TV. She didn't want to talk about her day, make plans, or open up at all, just one-line responses. She'd get frustrated when I asked about our plans, or when we'd have a romantic date. After the first 6 months, the relationship had basically become platonic. I was friends with other women and started making excuses that I had to work late. Secretly, I was meeting up with some of my friends and coworkers. Eventually, one of the women and I ended up seeing each other. We had a lot of chemistry. Her personality was much more active and forward-thinking. She also had an intimate appetite that suited me. After about a month of seeing her, I dropped the bomb on my girlfriend at the time. I told her it was time to end the relationship and for her to leave, as she wasn't contributing to us despite my efforts to engage her. Of course, she caused a major scene and acted hurt. Truth be told, I felt like she was putting on a show to maintain a place to stay outside her parents' house. She was a waitress, server, and occasional bartender. I wasn't having it. I told her, "I'm sorry it has to be this way, but you can't just walk into my house every day and ignore my existence like I'm just a roommate. This has been going on for almost a year, and that's not the life I want with my partner." Story 16. I had a friend die in my arms. I spent the night drinking and pondering the frailty of life, thinking about my own, in a broken state. I decided to do it with other people before life passed me by. In the end, I got divorced. I truly believe this was my path. I blew up my life to find myself in the rubble, and I'm a better person for it now. Edit, I may have posted this hastily before. The events were far more tragic. It was my friend's stag party. He was supposed to get married the following week, but instead, the wedding became a funeral. The whole situation messed me up. I was approaching 40 and already starting a midlife crisis. I had been with the same person my whole life. We had become friends, and I tried to talk to my wife about how I was feeling, but she brushed it off because she was busy with her career. I made mistakes, hurt people, and lost friends. I don't feel shame around it. I share my life decisions in hopes that others can take something away from them. My ex-wife and I are still good friends. We talk often. This was my path. Story 17. I was having issues in my relationship at the time. The girl I was with, let's call her Mary, said we might be over because she wanted someone who was religious. I went to a friend, Kate, to talk it out. She was a good friend, and we were close. After talking to Kate for a while, she convinced me that Mary would leave me and that there was no point in trying to talk things through. I was pretty upset. Kate offered to hang out to distract me since I was really in love with Mary and wanted her to be the one. When Kate was dropping me off, she kissed me. That just escalated over time. I should have said no and tried to talk to Mary about it instead. Kate apologized later for manipulating me, but honestly, I should never have given in. It wasn't about Kate being better than Mary. I loved Mary so much, but I was convinced I'd lose her. Story 18. She was a teammate I had no interest in at first. I had just popped the question to my first wife, and my team decided to throw me a bachelor party. We went to a club, and my coworker went too. She and I ended up making out. I'm not even sure how much happened since I was so drunk. The next day, walking down the aisle to get married, I couldn't get her out of my mind. I should have manned up and called it off then. A month later, we bought a home. 2 months after that, I was sleeping with my coworker. In my defense, if there is any, though honestly there isn't, I didn't do it with her until after letting my wife know we needed to separate. Divorce followed, and then I married the second woman. Everyone I knew, family and friends, said, "Dude, she's going to burn you down one day," and she most certainly did, eventually. Here's the kicker. The woman I left was at least 10 times hotter than the woman I left her for. My first wife would have done anything for me. The second? Not even close. Huge life mistake, and I'm still ashamed of it to this day. Story 19. I was really into erotic stories online as part of my daily self-improvement. I wrote a few and would chat on the discussion boards. There was an older woman, late 30s, with whom I chatted. She worked near my apartment, and I was in my early 20s at the time. We arranged to meet during her lunch break, and when I went to pick her up, she said, "Let's skip lunch and go back to yours." We did this a few times a week for a few months. I found out early on that she was married, though not really happily. Eventually, she stopped calling or messaging for lunch dates, as I basically didn't make any effort to arrange them. Story 20. I had been cheated on in both of my past relationships. Both left me completely devastated, and both exes went on to date the guy they cheated with. After that, I started seeing relationships more as a casual thing. I figured my heart wouldn't be broken if I had someone else to rely on when things inevitably fell apart. At one point, I was dating 2 people and sleeping with 4 others at the same time. I know it sounds terrible, but I don't really regret it. It gave me confidence knowing I had a backup plan, and that made me better at dating. I moved to a new city with a clean slate and married the first person I dated there, never cheated. But I had more practice setting boundaries and not being a pushover. Story 21. I've never been a cheater, but I came close. You need some context about me. I have no radar for this sort of thing. I only realized my ex-wife was interested because she sat on my lap spontaneously and put her arm around me. I can spot a violent outburst from a patient coming a mile away, but I never got the hang of figuring out when a woman is interested. While I was in the Navy, we pulled into a port in Greece. There was a pretty little thing named Geisha, tan skin, dark hair, small waist, legs for days, the whole shebang. She had made her way through the team over the course of our visits, and apparently it was my turn. I was hammered at the time. She came out and steered the conversation toward going back to the hotel. Drunk and stupid, I thought. Oh, she probably just needs a ride. Nay. Shipmates came up and told me something along the lines of, "You're in for a treat. She's got away with her mouth." It finally clicked, and I hauled A in a drunken stumble up the road until another married guy congratulated me and escorted me back to the hotel. The next morning, she was at the hotel with another teammate and wouldn't so much as look at me. He proposed, by the way. Not sure if they're still married. It's been a number of years. Story 22. We've been together for 10 years and we still are. However, a couple of months ago, I noticed something that made me uncomfortable. She was texting a lot, and she kept doing it at night when we went to sleep. I have trouble falling asleep and wake up many times. I let it go for a while until I decided to look at her phone. In these 10 years, I had never done something like that. I trusted her with my life. To my surprise, I found that she was texting and flirting with some guy. Upon further checking, I noticed she did this a lot with many guys. I even saw explicit pictures she had sent. It felt like a horse kicked me in the chest. I wasn't expecting this at all. I started feeling extremely anxious and sad to the point that I confronted her. She told me that she'd been doing this all along, that nothing was serious, that these people meant nothing, and that they were all from other cities or countries. There was one guy who lived close to our home, about 5 minutes away, and they were doing this. He was pushing her to meet him. I work from home, so there isn't much time we aren't together, and I think that's why she didn't meet him and ended contact with him. I don't know if she ever met someone else before. I trusted her blindly. Now I don't. When talking about it, she says she never did anything real, never cheated, and that she does. And that this because of a self-esteem problem, she wants to feel noticed, desired, and validated. My previous long-term relationship ended because of something similar. But that time my ex did get with other guys, ended up pregnant with one of them, and left with him. Now I have moments when I don't care about this, and others when I feel terribly bad and insecure. I don't feel I will ever fully trust her, or anyone, again. I've had many chances to cheat if I wanted to, but I never did. I'm more of a relationship person. I've never wanted to go that route. Story 23. After dropping out of grad school, I moved to a new city to be with my then boyfriend of 4 years. He was in his own PhD program, and the stress was intense. He also wasn't used to taking care of himself, and I was going through a complete mental breakdown. After months of misery, I pushed, agreed to open our relationship. I went on a handful of dates with trashy, toxic dudes, and then came home complaining about my experiences. My boyfriend had met one woman he liked to play video games with. My parents wouldn't allow consoles growing up, so I never really learned how to play well. After weeks of me making no progress meeting any quality men, my boyfriend asked to see my phone. I handed it over. He opened my Bumble, swiped left on a few guys, then held one up for me to see. This guy seems like your type. The profile he showed me was a guy I wasn't typically attracted to, and I was wary of his crystal-toting, spiritual seeker vibes. But I was tired of having the same experience with dudes who had star tattoos on their elbows and a drinking problem. Bonus points if you can guess the state I'm in. My boyfriend swiped right on Crystal Guy, thank goodness no dreads, and told me to message him and see what happened. Crystal Guy and I exchanged a grand total of 12 messages before agreeing to meet at a public place. My boyfriend had recently started banging with a video game woman. One night I had a full-blown panic attack, admittedly not the first one of the week. I was exhausting him, and he left mid-attack for a date with her. A few days later, I met Crystal Guy for tea. We locked eyes and something shifted. He sat down across from me and I heard in my mind, "Here now, pay attention." We hit it off easily, calmly, comfortably. Before he walked back to his car, I asked to kiss him. From that moment, I should have ended things with my then boyfriend immediately. Instead, I proceeded to break practically every rule we had laid out for our open relationship. Rules I had created myself, including doing it in our home while he was out with friends. He confronted me. I denied it. I was falling fast and hard for Crystal Guy every day, but I was a coward, already unstable and selfish. I left my boyfriend within a month of meeting Crystal Guy. 2 months later, Crystal Guy and I were living together. 6 years after that, we are engaged. Yes, my ex literally handpicked my soon-to-be husband. I am grateful every single day. Story 24. I was really unhappy for years, but stayed out of fear of repeating the mistakes of my divorced parents, who treated each other terribly before and after they split. Little did I know, staying in a loveless relationship was the mistake I should have avoided. I'm an emotional person and found companionship in friends, since my wife and I didn't talk and were never close. One day I figured, why not just have some good time with no attachment? After all, I got my affection from everyone other than her. Why not her as well? As long as I stayed at home, I was better than my parents, who acted like terrible people. Soon, it wasn't only the banging. I was also getting affection from her, and I had never felt more loved, heard, or understood in my entire life. I had never been so happy and free before. Suddenly staying married seemed like the biggest mistake of my life. It's been 2 years. I can't wait to marry her and have kids. We are still both happy. We argue like anyone else, but I can tell she cares when she sees I'm hurt. Something I never got in my last relationship. I feel loved. Story 25. Is it technically my affair if I was single and she wasn't? Oh well. She knocked on the door of the EMS station in town and asked for a volunteer application. It was a pretty unremarkable first meeting, other than the fact that I thought she was beautiful. Fast forward about 2 weeks and I ran into her at a bar with her fiancé. We exchanged numbers that night on a professional level only. Soon after, she started coming to trainings. She was already a nurse, and we had an EMT class running at the time. I happened to be one of the teachers. In our state, even a doctor has to take an EMT basic class before they can challenge the test for the paramedic level. Long story short, we started spending a lot of time together. We talked more often and started accidentally running into each other at local bars. Her fiance liked me in the beginning and used to buy me shots and drinks all the time. Before long, we were much more than friends. That started a long couple of years filled with both awesome and dark times in my life. I don't regret much of it, but I'll say this. If I were older, wiser, and not a party animal, I would be with her today. And boy, I'll tell you, I miss her like crazy. And it's been about 7 years. Story 26. My relationship of 7 years was no longer good. I hated my job, and when I started a new course, I found myself in a group of people my own age and background. We started hanging out and became friends in an otherwise, for me, hostile world. There was this one girl who was married who paid attention to me, and I slowly fell for her. Since I would pass by where she lived on my way home, I gave her a ride. I guess being unhappy and receiving attention is a toxic mix for judgment and self-respect. We started an affair that ultimately ended with both of us leaving our respective relationships. There was, however, no ground to build a life together. So in the end, everyone was miserable. I'm not proud of this period of my life, but it doesn't haunt me. I do not understand comments like, once a cheater, always a cheater. I learned from the experience the hard way, and it took me a couple of years. But when I met my wife, I like to think I was a better version of myself, a sadder but wiser man. We've been together now for over 20 years, and I have never felt the need to lay an eye on another woman. Story 27. When I was married many years ago and eventually divorced for good reason, I had an online affair. This was back in the very early 90s when the internet was so fucking amazing for meeting people, and IRC chat was everything. I used to go to a parent's chat room and started talking during a group chat about my marriage, which was falling apart. My then husband was an a-hole. My emotional life was barren. I was so lonely. He was cold and withdrew love and affection whenever he was angry with me, which was all the time. A guy in the chat started talking to me privately, and soon after, he began telling me he always thought I was funny and smart, and that he loved it when I joined the chat. He told me he and his wife were separating, and it turned out to be a lie. Until that point, however, I can't describe in words how good it felt to be wanted, to be seen, to have someone say nice things about me. I was walking on clouds. I'm posting this because if you are in a committed relationship and you're being lazy, taking your partner for granted, being critical, playing stupid mind games, and refusing to share your feelings or talk to them, don't complain and play the victim when someone comes along and makes you feel alive again, and you leave them. The loneliest I ever felt in my life was when I was married. Story 28. I met him on a dating app. During the date, he told me he was married, but his wife was living in another country, and he didn't want to be celibate for months. I told him, cool, not interested, but we can be friends. So we started hanging out as friends, but it slowly escalated. He was constantly pushing for more, and I tried to resist, but not hard enough. Eventually, it developed into a full affair, which only lasted a few months. His wife then arrived, and we haven't spoken since. Story 29. I moved to a new city for work, far away from my girlfriend. We'd been together for years, and we were at a crap or get off the pot point. I decided to move forward in that relationship and proposed, but my heart wasn't in it. We were planning to get married in a year when my girlfriend came out to move with me. I was a coward. I posted in the subreddit for the new city asking about making friends, and a woman reached out. We immediately hit it off, but it was just platonic at first, so I let it roll. Bit by bit, we started flirting. I pushed back half-heartedly, but I let it run too far. I wanted it to happen and wanted to be convinced to make it happen. We got along really well, had similar ways of thinking and interests, and had a lot of fun together. Great chemistry. Really great. She rapidly became a close friend. Meanwhile, my relationship was crumbling. Neither of us was particularly happy, and I wasn't man enough to end it. After a few months, I went out for drinks with the new girl, and we started getting handsy. But nothing beyond that. A couple of weeks later, I had made up my mind to dump my girlfriend and be with the new girl. I knew what I had to do, but I still didn't have the courage. Lust got the better of me, and we started sleeping together. It took me another couple of weeks to finally break up with my ex. In the end, things didn't work out with the new girl. It turned out she also had a boyfriend far away. In a long-distance relationship, which she had been keeping secret. I was pretty pissed and broke things off. We didn't speak for a couple of years after that, but we recently reconnected and apologized to each other for the way we treated one another. We're no longer in the same city, but we stay in contact and are good friends. She's a good person, just a human being like me, trying to do her best and figure things out. I do a lot of good things, but I failed on this one. My ex met a great guy soon after me and is very happy with him now. I'm going back to visit soon, and I'm going to see if she would like to meet. I'll apologize, and I know she'll appreciate that. My affair partner broke up with her long-distance boyfriend because she wasn't happy in that relationship. She's a great woman, but unfortunately hasn't had much luck in romance lately. I'm sure she'll find someone soon. I spent a few years in therapy trying to be a better person. I met a few different people while figuring myself out. I'm not proud of what I did, but I accept myself as a flawed human being. I'm now in a stable relationship and much better equipped to be a better boyfriend and person. I understand why people say, once a cheater, always a cheater. But no. After seeing the pain and turmoil it caused and how it turned my life upside down, absolutely not. I'm also a lot healthier mentally now and more mature. Life is tough, guys. Be kind to each other. Story 30. We just fell in love. We were both in relationships at the time and we both loved our partners, but we also loved each other. Loving each other didn't take anything away from our feelings for our partners, and our feelings for our partners didn't take anything away from our feelings for each other. We simply had a connection as special as the connections we had with our partners, and we couldn't ignore it. Story 31. When he told me I was a spineless worm for not standing up to my roommate, I had already caved on breaking up with him. He said I didn't actually want to break up. I was just stressed and didn't know what I wanted. Being called such a foul name while crying and distressed over how I was being treated by a friend made me realize I truly was a doormat. I went and made out with a guy who had been interested in me for a while, and then called my boyfriend to tell him he wasn't going to want to visit me the following weekend because I had cheated. I lived a wild and wonderful single life for a while after that. Story 32, I got super close. I'd been married for more than 10 years when I met a coworker who embodied all the physical attributes I'd ever wanted in a woman. I did my best to ignore her, but my own marriage was not going well, and the temptation to look elsewhere weighed heavily on me. She was married too, and we had a few common interests. As we explored these in small moments at the office, she started complaining more and more about her husband. One day during lunch, she was especially upset. She had caught her husband communicating with an ex online and confronted him. In their conversation, he asked if she would remain faithful. As we sat in my car in the office parking lot finishing the conversation, she said to me, "I told him I would try." There was an awkward silence. I knew that if I had leaned over and kissed her, she would have returned it. Although I wanted her physically, the crap storm that would have followed wasn't worth it to me. Story 33. Flirting on Facebook? I got the attention I wasn't getting from my partner at the time. My partner was so inattentive that I ended up doing it with another guy almost every afternoon for about 3 months before I ended the relationship. And he never knew. I was very young and inexperienced. This happened about 10 years ago. I don't even speak to either of them anymore. It's not my proudest moment, but I can't change it, and I've made peace with the decision. I'm taking it to the grave. Story 34. I was bored and feeling misunderstood in my marriage. My husband was a decent partner and a good friend. We just didn't see eye to eye on a lot of things. I met a neighbor that I just clicked with. We liked the same music, enjoyed the outdoors, and did activities together. My husband was more introverted and could only handle the outside world in smaller doses. We got to know each other very well. We made out a few times, but mostly we just talked, hung out, and played cards. It was more of an emotional affair than anything else. After a couple of months, it became clear that we either had to stay away from each other or I was going to have to end my marriage. We couldn't stay away. Breaking up my marriage was one of the most painful things I've ever done. That said, I'm still with my neighbor, and we're pretty darn happy these days. Story 35. We were both unhappily married with young children and couldn't afford to break up our respective families. We met online through a shared hobby. We started talking about our lives, found a lot of common ground, and it grew from there. My spouse was disinterested unless they were in the mood for banging, which had become perfunctory, dispassionate, and highly infrequent. I was working my A off to support the family, cooking, cleaning, laundry, doctor appointments, and exhausted. We didn't fight, we just existed together. My affair partner was in a similar situation. It wasn't intentional, but when we realized how nice it was to have someone to talk to vent to, and to commiserate with, we didn't stop. As soon as we could, we met in person, and it was incredible. Was it selfish? Yes. Should I have left my marriage much earlier? Yes, but then my children would have paid the price. Did I try everything else first? Yes, and it went nowhere. My now ex-spouse was complacent, saw no problem, and refused to change. They knew that. If I walked out the door, I'd either have to leave my kids behind or put everyone in a terrible financial situation. I wasn't going to do that. I stayed, worked even harder, and had the affair. I don't regret it, and I don't apologize for it. It saved me emotionally, and my partner is the best person I've ever known. As soon as I was able, I left my spouse. My partner is in the midst of doing the same thing. We're patient. The kids get priority and stable households first and foremost. No, my ex never knew, never even suspected. Honestly, they probably wouldn't have cared as long as my paycheck kept coming in every week. When I left, that was literally the only thing they were upset about, losing my income. It's easy to point fingers and say cheaters are the scum of the earth. I'd agree in many cases. Two adults with no other responsibilities? Yep, it's cowardly to cheat. Just break up. Get a roommate, a side hustle, whatever it takes to make ends meet. It gets more complicated when there are dependents. My partner wasn't taking anything from my spouse when we got together. Those gaps were already there. I had already tried counseling, therapy, and everything else. Relationships only work when both people make an effort. My ex wasn't making any effort because they had already locked me down. 12 years after we first met, my partner still makes an effort every single day. Story 36, I was in a 3-year relationship with a girl who truly loved me, wanted to marry me, and have a family. I was less sure about all of that, but had still been dedicated. We lived together and had a dog together. Our relationship was rocky though, and I felt miserable overall. It all came crashing down when the new work hires arrived in the summer. Among them was a girl. I remember having my first shift with her. It was instant chemistry. Soon we were texting, confiding, saying sweet things to each other. We were switching shifts to work together. We started hanging out one-on-one, sharing intimate details. We were emotionally cheating. I loved her, and I think she loved me, or at least had very strong feelings. One day I lied to my girlfriend and said I had work, but instead spent the day with the other girl at her place. We watched movies, laughed, snuggled, and then kissed. That's when things got real. We poured out our feelings for one another. 2 weeks later, she said we couldn't be together and that she had to stay with her boyfriend. She confessed to him. We started talking again a few weeks later and went out secretly before she cut it off once and for all. One day, I was holding her hand on a swing set. We said, "I love you," and I dropped her off at her apartment. I've never seen her since, never spoken with her. Not long after, my girlfriend and I broke up. Thank goodness for her. I'm guilty, but immensely relieved she never found out. She would have been absolutely wrecked. I think that if you cheat on your significant other, you do not tell them. Deal with any guilt, fix yourself, or split up. It's not right to put that on someone else just to ease your own guilt. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.